Many people will say that if you don't do something, someone else will. I mean, how many times have we heard that? In Siyaya, it's quite different. What we like to say is, what are the consequences if someone doesn't do something? How many people will be pushed below the poverty line? How many more people will we watch suffer? I had a realization roughly 2 years ago whereby I've always felt very strongly about poverty and the social and economic inequalities that characterize South Africa. But the reality is I was doing very, very little about it. And I mean, how can you be passionate about something or claim to be passionate about something, but you're not actually doing anything to make a situation better? That's when I realized I needed to stop using excuses, because that's all they were, to postpone what I really wanted to do. You know, it was either I was too young or wasn't properly equipped with the skills one needed to make an impact. And I realized that they were just excuses, and I decided to pursue it. And when one begins to pursue whatever their passion is, as I did, there will be the incredible parts, but there will always be the really challenging parts. And when Siyaya started, there was nothing smooth about it. In fact, the first few months, I found myself looking for volunteers for the project, looking for people to train in Khayelitsha. You wouldn't think it's that tough to find unemployed people, but to find the right people can be quite a challenge, and operating with constrained resources. To somewhat reduce the disappointments that I knew I would encounter, I would call this my pilot phase, because I thought, you know what, if you call something a pilot phase, it's okay to make mistakes. And there were many times where I felt that Siyaya was down and out. There were times where I felt that the struggles I'd encountered and mistakes I'd made would be external failures that would create a stigma that would lead to the eventual downfall of the project. And I'd like to say something about failure. A failure is not a humiliation, and it's certainly not a proof that you cannot do something. A failure is a learning curve and an opportunity for growth. And it's very easy to stand up here and say that, and I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, will agree with that statement. But it's amazing how when it's your mistake or your failure, it's all of a sudden very different. Failing will happen, mistakes will happen, but it's not the failure that matters. It's how you react to the failure that will define what you do. And one has to realize that for a vast number of mistakes you'll make, you may only have a handful of successes. But it's those successes that count, and it's those successes that are going to go on and impact someone's life. And it's important to consider that had it not been for the experience and the knowledge gained through the mistakes you had made, it would have been impossible to achieve those successes. Going a bit back in time to the latter part of 1944, actually, I wasn't around then, but there was a neurologist and psychologist by the name of Viktor Frankl, and he was being transported to the Auschwitz concentration camp during the Second World War. During his time held under the Nazi regime that would see his wife, brother, and mother slain, he turned to writing about his experiences, and he came up with many remarkable findings, of which one in particular I think is quite relevant to the message I'm trying to send out. And that is, in life, you will have various stimuli and responses. A stimulus is some kind of experience, something beyond your control, something exogenous. And the response, somewhat self-explanatory, is how you react to it. And between whatever the stimulus is and your response is a space of creativity. And that is entirely up to you on how you react to it. And whether your stimulus is being kept as someone in a concentration camp during the Second World War, whether it's growing up in a country full of poverty, or whatever it is, that space of creativity is yours. Earlier this year, I was privileged enough to spend time at the Dell Social Innovation Lab in Boston, Massachusetts. The lab brings 17 young entrepreneurs from around the world together to work on various projects of theirs and to work with some of the leading experts in almost any sphere you can think of. And upon seeing who the other candidates would be at the lab, I was in awe. Someone was pitching to NASA about a polymer that her team had created that enabled vaccines to be transported without being temperature controlled. Someone else was fighting shoelessness in Bangladesh, something that actually claims countless of lives every year. And someone else was distributing solar-powered lamps to homes in Indonesia that fall off the main power grid. These are just to name a few. But beyond going to Boston to represent my own initiative, Siyaya, I wanted to find out one distinct thing. What makes these people different? How do they accomplish such incredible things at such a young age? There has to be some kind of inherent characteristic that pushes some further than others, and if there isn't, then why is every young person not doing what they are? Although I met some of the most remarkable individuals, unfortunately that characteristic simply does not exist. Everyone in this room, and everyone in the world is passionate about something. But the only difference between whoever you may meet off the street and the people that I was fortunate enough to meet in Boston was that they had managed to turn their passions into something far more powerful. They had turned them into a series of actions. And these actions are constantly taking place. I mean, think how much is going on in the world right now. How many babies were born, how many people died, how many businesses just started, how many failed, how many people just had that aha moment in their lives. Think of just how much is happening every time you blink. And now consider how much goes on when you go to sleep for a period of several hours. It wasn't long ago that I was having a conversation with a role model of mine, my older sister, very cute, about the fact that I often wake up very early to start my day. I'm just a morning person, that's my thing. But I'm often up at 5 to start doing whatever it is that I need to get done. And she said that it was as if I felt that while I slept, the world was changing without me. And that was something that I wasn't prepared to accept. And I'm not saying don't sleep. What I'm saying is something you already know, and that's that the world is rapidly changing. And the real question is that something you are happy to watch? Are you happy to watch the world change and perhaps whatever your passion is, not change? Or are you going to step forward, be a part of the change, fight for the change, and make that change happen? You may already know what your passion is, and for those of you who don't, the only way to figure out what it is to go out and do things. It will not come looking for you. It's about trying things, leaving your comfort zone. And if you do something that doesn't rock your world, then you know that that's not what you're passionate about, and you've still taken a step forward to see whatever it is that you are passionate about. And for those of you who are looking to turn whatever your passion is, or once you found it, into these series of actions, the only advice that I can give from what I've learned, my limited experience, is that be ambitious about whatever it is that you do, but at the same time be realistic in order to have an impact. Remember that the first landing on the moon was certainly not the first expedition to space. It's about creating the incremental steps to having an impact. In fact, it took Siyaya almost a full calendar year for me and my team to actually turn around and say, you know what, we're having a serious impact and we are helping people. It wasn't the first time that we went out to Khayelitsha, and it wasn't the 20th time. It was about laying down the correct foundations and learning along the way. You can't be an expert in something you have little or no experience in, and everyone starts somewhere, and that's where I started. When I started, I knew very little. Hopefully I know a bit more now, but back then I didn't know that much, and it was about just learning every step of the way. And although it was an incredible year, my team would have never made it through and pursued had we not been incredibly passionate about the people we were trying to help and the cause we were fighting for. And having said that, now I definitely don't want the message to take away from this being that whatever you start or get involved in is going to take a year. That's not true. And that it's this seemingly impossible mountain to climb. That's not true either. Every step in that year was as exciting as the other, and it provided remarkable opportunities to learn and grow, both on a personal basis and as a project. When I look at South Africa today, I see a country that right now is becoming increasingly divided. And I see a country where there are a lot of people suffering, and there's a high, strong, positive correlation between that division and the suffering. How shocking is it to say that we live in a country where children go to sleep every single day without having eaten? How shocking is it to say that that is the least of their worries, because those children live in fear every day of being raped, irrespective of their age or gender? And how shocking further is it that hearing something like that doesn't really shock us anymore because it's almost so normal. There has never been a more crucial time in post-1994 South Africa for the citizens of this country, for us, to stand up and be counted for. And the saddest thing when I look at South Africans as a whole is that we are very passionate about this country and we care deeply about the struggles it faces. But how many people are actively every day going and doing something to change it? Al Gore said recently at an event in Toronto called We Day, and if any of you are looking for inspiration, do yourself a favor and Google We Day, W-E Day, and I guarantee you won't be the same afterwards. But he said, never ever doubt your ability to change the world in a positive way. I speak mostly from a young person's perspective, and it's often about us being the future leaders of this country and the world. But how can we one day assume that position of leadership if we don't equip ourselves for that right now? I urge each and every one of you to consider the stimulus that has been today and will continue with the other speakers, and to carefully orchestrate what your response is going to be to that. It's all about tomorrow. It's about bringing unemployment rates down by some point in the future, crime rates, by living in a greener world tomorrow. But the reality of the matter is, none of that can exist tomorrow unless we act today. Thank you very much.